there, everybody. Welcome. I got a question a while ago asking about how to keep your artwork consistent in your comic as you go along. Now, this is something that I personally have struggled with a lot. Consistency is difficult. Personally, I am just a messy artist. I have ADHD, certified, and there have been many times in my life where I have focused on the output rather than keeping things pretty and tidy and consistent. But since I am bad at keeping things consistent, I have some lovely coping strategies to kind of help with that whole hot mess to keep me good. I have like checklists to keep me good. So I don't just put garbage on the page. Let's hecking go. Okay, so the first place to start, as early as you can, you may have already started your comic, you may be in the design process. If you're in the design process, like that is the place to start. Create as much reference material for yourself as you can. And that is still possible to do retroactively if you've already started. Just sit down and start documenting like your character designs and settings, etc., as I'm going to go into. But if you're doing it right from the get-go, it will save you so many headaches. As I can tell you, since the first comic Bones and I created, I made 0 reference sheets. So it was very on the fly. You're in the design stage or later, but you're creating reference material. So this can include character turnaround sheets. I think that's like the first one people think of, at least is what I think of. So just detailing your character design from all angles. I guess make it as detailed as you need or want it to be, if it's just you working on it. But it's really helpful to just understand like, I don't know, how their clothing works, how their hair looks at different angles, all that stuff. What do their expressions look like? Just so that, again, you can keep it consistent across the comic. I would also create setting design sheets. This can be something like a floor plan, just from like the top down. That's usually where I start with a setting, but it can also be like detailed sketches of what the set piece looks like. It can include important props and furniture or items that are in the scene. Yeah, a lot of this feels like very obvious, but it's really great to have, just so that you don't have to go flipping through your previous pages to find any of this information. You just have it there with you, and it can be as detailed or as not detailed as you want it. And I would recommend just having it open, I don't know, on your computer or print it out or whatever. Just keep it open as you work, just so that it's there. And again, you don't have to stop your wonderful workflow to go find your reference material. So yeah, make all that stuff for yourself. Now, along the same lines, I'd also recommend creating like a style guide for yourself. Again, this is really great to do early on when you're in the design process. But again, you can make note of what you've already decided if you've already started your comic. So I would start by taking note of the different techniques and style choices you want for your comic. Some of these can include your brush that you're using. You know, if you're using a physical pen to ink, you know, which brush are you going to use for what? If it's digital, are you going to use a specific textured brush? What size is that brush, etc.? It's really helpful. This sounds very like tiny details, but if you take a break from your comic and like 3 months later you pick it back up again, it's so nice to be like, oh, I'm using a 0.8 size brush with a rough pencil texture. Awesome. So you don't have to guess at what you did 3 months ago. You can also keep note of your color palettes, how you plan to do shading and rendering. You know, are you doing cell shading? Are you doing screen tones? Are you doing a more kind of painterly look? You can keep track of text size, fonts, your kerning and leading. Kerning being the space horizontally between letters, and leading being the line spacing between different lines of text. Keep note of all that and keep it consistent. Gosh dang it. You can keep note of your gutter and panel styles. You can keep note of your speech bubble styles, your background styles. So for example, is your background going to use like thinner lines, or is it going to use desaturated colors? You know, there's lots to play around with that. And other things you should really consider when you're in this like style guide phase is considering what language you want to use, visual language you want to use to indicate different, I don't know, stages, phases, planes of existence in your comic. What does a flashback look like? Are you going to style it different than you would during the present time in your comic? what does a dream sequence look like? You don't want the reader to be confused when you're suddenly showing a dream. Or maybe you do. Keep note of that. Maybe you do have characters going to like bizarro upside down backrooms dimensions. Like, do you want a different style when they go there compared to like the normal world of your story? Lots of things to consider. And it's just great to think about early on so that you don't confuse your reader down the line and you can keep it consistent. So your flashbacks aren't, sometimes they're in sepia tone and sometimes they're grayscale and sometimes they're full color. I don't know. Just keep it consistent, guys. Now, all this stuff is like really great to keep note of, but leave room to play around as well. I think understanding this stuff really, again, just saves you a whole headache if you take time away from your comic, and it just helps keep things simple as you're like making decisions going forward in your story. But obviously, like, leave room to play around if that will help you enjoy the creation process. On the flip side of deciding what you want to do, sometimes it can also be helpful to decide what you don't want to include in your comic. You could say like, I'm never going to use this technique because I hate it, just as a personal preference. That can be something to keep note of, or I don't know. The thing is, that stuff's also very helpful. Like if you say like include this and don't include this, that can also be helpful if you have collaborators even down the line. Like maybe right now you work by yourself, but maybe in the future you hire, I don't know, a colorist or an inker or something. So it's always good to have that reference material. Another thing to consider when you're trying to keep your art very consistent across your comic, it is helpful to create simpler designs for your comic, just because a simple design can be easier to replicate quickly, whereas something more detailed can take longer to create, and I think there's like more room for error. That's like, I say like just simplify, but that's like a really difficult process. But it is something to keep in mind, because if you can break your character or your scene or whatever you're drawing into like simple shapes that are easy to kind of replicate from any angle, that can really help with like keeping things consistent. It can help with like drawing the same thing over and over again easily. So that's just something to consider. Oh my god, he's sharpening a knife in the background. Bones, don't be scary. Oh my god. I left a note for myself here in my little script saying you should figure all of this out before you start your comic, because then you don't have to feel guilty if you like change things later. But again, I think you can do things retroactively. Ignore past Ursula, she didn't know what she was talking about. I think it is helpful to have that style guide from the get-go. I think personally it just helps with like making decisions quickly, because there's a lot of decisions that go into like laying out a single comic page, for example, so it helps to like take off some of the brain load when you're laying out your comic. You don't also have to be thinking about all your designs and style stuff while you lay things out. But I also think it's really important to remember that as you are working on your comic, your style and your art will change. It comes with the territory of working on a long-term project over a long span of time, or even if you're working on like a big project in a short amount of time, like just the mechanical working on something over and over again, drawing the same characters over and over again for your comic pages, you're going to, I think, just naturally improve. You're going to find like your groove, you're going to get more comfortable drawing your characters and your comic style and your settings, and technically you're going to improve because you're going to be learning things as you draw things over and over again, and things are going to change, and that is okay. I mean, I don't think people are upset when their art improves. I think that would be a complaint I have not seen yet, but I wouldn't worry too much about things changing kind of as you draw them for that reason. I think if you have like the underlying style and design stuff beneath, even if it gets like kind of tightened and refined as you go along, I think just understanding that stuff up front or from the start, near the start, it will be consistent even if like the shape underneath fills out more, if that makes sense. I also think that one of the wonderful things about comics is that, especially like online comics, web comics, webtoons, all that good stuff we're all working on, readers are very used to the artwork changing as the comic goes along, because these are comics that are coming out like over the course of years because they just take so long to create, where I myself will see a comic page, like someone will post an update, or I'll catch like a new update on a site somewhere, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, this latest chapter looks amazing. The art is so good. And even if I go back to the start of the comic and maybe the style feels a bit different, or it's not, the quality of the art isn't where it is in the present back when they started, I don't care, because I'm like, I'm gonna read so I get to this like amazing artwork at the end where they are right now. And I think most people feel that way. So I really would not sweat it if your consistency isn't always there in your artwork. I'm also personally, like I've said, there's been times in my life where I'm really focused on output of comics rather than like quality. It's a hard balance where like I do want my art to look nice. I don't want to just put out stinky stuff all the time. But currently I am working on a webtoon where I'm trying not to worry too much about the quality or consistency because I just want to get the dang thing out. I have plenty of projects where I'm like fussing over everything and perfecting things and I'm really proud of them, but they are very, very slow to get out. And I mean, part of that is just checking things are refined, but like I said, I'm a messy artist. It takes extra for me to like make things nice and pretty and neat. It's really nice to just have a project that I can just slap down and it's fun. And like there's a measure of quality control there. Like I don't want to put out something I wouldn't be happy being like, it's a sketch. Sometimes you just gotta get the work out. I think ultimately that is my advice for anyone who's like starting their webtoon or their webcomic. Just start. Your first project is probably not going to be your best. You're not going to be super proud of it later. Maybe you will. For my first comic, there's definitely things I look back on that I'm proud of. Especially one of the big things though was getting it out there, posting it, finishing it. And that is what I will tell you all. Just start your comic. If all this consistency stuff is freaking you out and stopping you, like if this is an excuse to stop you from working on your comic, I'm gonna spritz you with a little water bottle and tell you to work on your comic and post it. Okay? I promise you, it's better than you think it is. Go post it right now. You can figure out your style guide later. Stinky sausage. Do what makes you happy. I love you guys. Could you do me a solid? Could you do me a tiny favor for me dropping my massive big brain knowledge? Could you please comment down below about what you're working on and possibly subscribe? Maybe click a little like button or a dislike button, whatever. I'm asking you a favor. Beggars can't be choosers. But thank you. Thank you for considering helping a little lady out with a favor. That's it. I'm going to Alberta now. Goodbye.